Crossed paths Nora, Wesley gripped her portfolio case tighter as the elevator ascended to the top floor of the gleaming Reed Technologies tower. At 32, she had never imagined selling her landscape architecture firm, her dream, her creation, to anyone, let alone to Harrison Reed, the notoriously calculating tech billionaire, who had suddenly developed an interest in sustainable urban design. The meeting's just a formality. Her business partner Daniela had assured her that morning. The papers are signed. Just smile, shake his hand, and we'll finally be able to pay our staff. 3 years of drought had devastated their eco-landscape business. Clients canceled contracts when water restrictions made their innovative designs seem like luxuries rather than necessities. The irony wasn't lost on Nora. Her work was meant to conserve resources, not waste them. But perception mattered more than reality in times of crisis. The elevator doors slid open to reveal a minimalist reception area overlooking the city skyline. A sleek, curved desk separated Nora from a woman with an elegant silver bob who raised her eyebrows expectantly. "Nora Wesley for Harrison Reed," Nora said, trying to sound confident despite the knot in her stomach. "Of course, Mr. Reed is expecting you." The woman, Vivian, according to her nameplate, smiled sympathetically as if sensing Nora's discomfort. Through those doors, Nora entered a vast office dominated by windows that framed the city like a living painting. A man stood with his back to her, hands clasped behind him as he gazed outward. Even from behind, Harrison Reed commanded presence, tall and straight-shouldered in a perfectly tailored gray suit, his dark hair threaded with silver at the temples. "Ms. Wesley," he said without turning. "Punctual. I appreciate that." His voice was unexpectedly warm, a rich baritone that contrasted with his cold reputation. When he finally turned to face her, Nora was struck by eyes the color of polished amber, and the complete absence of a smile in them. "Mr. Reed," she responded, stepping forward to offer her hand. "Thank you for taking an interest in Wesley Designs." His handshake was firm but brief. "I don't take interests, Ms. Wesley. I make investments." Nora forced herself to maintain eye contact. "And what exactly are you expecting to gain from this particular investment?" "Our firm specializes in sustainable urban landscaping, hardly the tech focus your company is known for." Harrison gestured to a glass conference table where her portfolio lay open, displaying renderings of her most ambitious project, a vertical watershed system for office buildings that recycled rainwater through a series of hanging gardens. "This," he said simply, tapping the image, "this is why I bought your company." "You bought my company for a concept design that hasn't secured permits yet?" "I bought your vision, Ms. Wesley." He moved closer, studying her face with unsettling intensity. "Your methods of water conservation in urban environments have applications beyond pretty gardens. Applications worth billions in a world increasingly facing water scarcity." Something in his tone made her bristle. "They're not pretty gardens, Mr. Reed. They're integrated ecosystems designed to—" "I know exactly what they are," he interrupted, his expression unchanged. "That's why you're here. But your execution was flawed. Your business model, unsustainable." Nora felt heat rise to her cheeks. "Our model was sound until the drought changed consumer priorities. We were adapting. You were drowning," he corrected, "in debt and outdated thinking. Your designs belong on a global scale, not on residential properties in drought-stricken California." She squared her shoulders. "You may have bought my company, Mr. Reed, but you don't understand my vision if you think it's just about scale." For the first time, something flickered in those amber eyes. Surprise, perhaps, or interest. "Enlighten me, then. My work isn't about exploitation, it's about harmony. Pushing these systems too far, too fast for profit rather than sustainability would undermine their very purpose." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Someday, Nora Wesley," he said quietly, "you'll thank me for seeing what you couldn't." She stiffened at his presumption. "I doubt that." "You will," he said with absolute certainty. "One day you'll realize I was the best thing that ever happened to your vision." Nora laughed despite herself. "Has anyone ever told you that confidence borders on arrogance, Mr. Reed?" "Frequently," he admitted, and for a brief moment, something almost human crossed his features. "But I'm rarely wrong." As she left his office that day, Nora couldn't shake the feeling that something significant had just begun. Something beyond a mere business acquisition. Harrison Reed had looked at her as if he could see a future she couldn't yet imagine. She had no way of knowing then how prophetic his words would prove to be, or how many tears would fall before she understood their meaning. Silent guardian 6 months into the Reed Technologies acquisition, Nora's world had been turned upside down. Her small office had been relocated to the 32nd floor of Reed Tower. Her staff doubled, and her budget increased tenfold. The only catch? Weekly progress meetings with Harrison Reed himself. "These water filtration rates are impressive," he commented during one such meeting, scrolling through her latest test results. "But we need to improve implementation time if we want to meet the Singapore deadline." Nora rubbed her temples. Quality can't be rushed, especially with systems this complex. "The biofilters need time to establish." Harrison leaned back in his chair, studying her with that inscrutable gaze. "Time is a luxury the market won't give us. Our competitors—" The shrill ring of her phone interrupted him. Nora glanced at the screen and felt the blood drain from her face. Providence Hospital, where her sister Fiona had been admitted that morning for what should have been routine tests. "I need to take this," she said, already standing. Harrison nodded curtly as she stepped outside the conference room. "Miss Wesley, this is Dr. Jameson. Your sister's condition has deteriorated. The arrhythmia appears to be caused by a previously undetected congenital defect. We need your consent for emergency surgery." The world tilted beneath Nora's feet. "I'm on my way," she managed, ending the call. When she re-entered the conference room, Harrison was reviewing blueprints as if nothing had happened. "I have to go," she said, gathering her papers with trembling hands. "Family emergency." He looked up, his expression unchanged. "Take the company car. It's faster than waiting for a ride share." Nora barely registered his words as she rushed out, forgetting her portfolio and phone charger in her haste. The next 12 hours passed in a blur of hospital corridors, medical jargon, and crushing fear. Fiona, her baby sister, her only family since their parents' death, lay pale and still, connected to machines that seemed too large for her slender frame. "The surgery was successful," Dr. Jameson explained, "but she'll need specialized care. The recovery will be lengthy, and the medication regimen is complex." Nora nodded numbly, mental calculations already racing. Her health insurance wouldn't cover most of these expenses. The sale of her company had cleared her business debts, but her personal savings were modest. "Do what's necessary," she said firmly. "I'll figure out the finances." It was nearly midnight when she stepped outside to clear her head. The hospital garden was small but peaceful, with a stone bench nestled among flowering shrubs. Nora sat heavily, finally allowing herself to cry, for Fiona, for the uncertainty ahead, for the overwhelming weight of responsibility. "Miss Wesley," the familiar voice startled her. Harrison Reed stood a few feet away, his tall figure silhouetted against the garden lights. He wore the same suit from their meeting, but his tie was loosened, and he carried a leather messenger bag. "Mr. Reed?" Nora quickly wiped her tears. "What are you doing here?" He approached cautiously, like someone approaching a wounded animal. "You left these." He held out her portfolio and phone charger. "And I thought you might need these." From his bag, he produced a thermal container and what appeared to be a file folder. Coffee. And some information that might be helpful. Bewildered, Nora accepted both. The folder contained detailed information about cardiac specialists, recovery programs, and, most surprisingly, a letter confirming that Fiona Wesley had been accepted into an exclusive medical trial for her specific condition. "All expenses covered. How did you—" she began. "I made some calls." He shrugged as if it were nothing. "The lead researcher owes me a favor." "Why would you do this?" Nora asked, genuinely confused by this unexpected kindness from a man reputed to have ice in his veins. Harrison's expression remained unreadable. "Your work is important. Your sister's illness would distract you." "So this is about the project?" She couldn't keep the disappointment from her voice. Something flickered in his amber eyes. Perhaps offense, perhaps hurt. "Think what you will, Ms. Wesley." He turned to leave, then paused. "The trial starts tomorrow. A car will come for your sister at 9. Before she could respond, he was gone, striding through the garden with the same purposeful confidence he showed in boardrooms. Over the following weeks, Nora split her time between the hospital and work. Fiona improved rapidly under the trial treatment, and Nora found herself increasingly puzzled by Harrison Reed's involvement. He never mentioned his intervention again, deflecting her attempts to thank him during their meetings. It wasn't until she overheard a conversation between his assistant, Vivian, and the CFO that Nora began to understand the true extent of Harrison's actions. The board is questioning his personal guarantee of the Wesley Medical Fund, the CFO muttered. $2 million is significant even for him. Mr. Reed doesn't make financial decisions lightly, Vivian responded coolly. If he's backing the Wesley situation, he has his reasons. $2 million. Personal guarantee. Nora felt the ground shift beneath her once again. That evening, she waited until most employees had left before approaching Harrison's office. Through the glass walls, she could see him working alone, his focus intense as he reviewed documents on his tablet. She knocked softly. "Enter," he called without looking up. Nora stepped inside, suddenly uncertain. "You guaranteed $2 million for my sister's care." Harrison set down his tablet, his expression carefully neutral. "You weren't meant to know that." "Why?" she pressed. "And don't tell me it's about the project again." For a long moment he was silent, studying her with those penetrating amber eyes. Finally he sighed, a surprisingly human sound from someone who seemed so detached. "When I was 24, he said quietly, my younger brother developed a similar condition. I was just starting my company. No connections, no influence. The experimental treatment that might have saved him was inaccessible to us." He looked away. Some opportunities should be available regardless of circumstance. Nora felt something crack inside her chest, her preconception of this man shattering against the reality of his quiet generosity. "I can't repay you," she said, softly. "I never expected repayment." Tears welled in her eyes before she could stop them. "Thank you, Harrison." It was the first time she had used his first name, and something in his expression shifted, softened almost imperceptibly. "Your sister will recover fully," he said with certainty. "And you'll continue your work without distraction." "That's all the thanks I require." As Nora left his office that night, she realized that the cold, calculating billionaire of public reputation might be just one facet of a far more complex man, one who understood loss and acted with compassion when it mattered most. The bridge between the Taiwan project was a nightmare from the beginning. An entire coastal district seeking to implement Nora's water reclamation systems on a scale she had only theorized. The potential impact was enormous, and so was the pressure. "This isn't working," Nora declared, sweeping architectural renderings from the conference table in frustration. 3 months of 18-hour days, and the core design still failed to integrate with the existing infrastructure. Her team had long since gone home, leaving her alone in the cavernous project room on the 40th floor. Alone, except for Harrison, who had taken to joining these late-night sessions with increasing frequency. "What specifically isn't working?" he asked, retrieving the scattered papers with surprising patience. "Everything!" She pressed her palms against her eyes. "The municipal system can't handle the throughput during monsoon season, and reducing capacity defeats the entire purpose." Harrison studied the blueprints thoughtfully. "What if we're approaching this backward? Instead of forcing your system to conform to their infrastructure, we adapt their infrastructure to our system," Nora finished, a spark of inspiration cutting through her exhaustion. "But that would require rebuilding their coastal pumping stations." Harrison was already pulling up city engineering files on his tablet. "Expensive, but not impossible. The local authorities would never approve such extensive modifications." A smile ghosted across Harrison's face, not the cold, calculating expression she'd first encountered, but something warmer, almost mischievous. "Leave the authorities to me. Focus on what will work, not what you think they'll accept." They worked through the night side by side, reimagining the project from its foundations. Dawn found them surrounded by new designs, empty coffee cups, and a surprising sense of camaraderie. "We make a decent team. Nora Wesley," Harrison remarked as golden light spilled through the windows. She smiled despite herself. "When you're not being impossibly stubborn, you do have some useful insights." His laugh, a genuine, unguarded sound, caught her off guard. It transformed his face, softening the sharp edges and lighting his amber eyes with warmth she'd rarely glimpsed. "Coming from you, that's high praise indeed." 2 weeks later, they were in Taiwan, presenting their revised plans to government officials. To Nora's astonishment, Harrison conducted the entire presentation in fluent Mandarin, navigating complex technical questions and cultural nuances with effortless grace. "You never mentioned you spoke Mandarin," she whispered during a brief recess. "You never asked?" he replied simply. The project was approved unanimously, and that evening found them celebrating on the rooftop restaurant of their hotel, the Taipei skyline glittering around them like fallen stars. "To impossible things made possible," Harrison toasted, raising his glass. Nora clinked her glass against his. "And to unexpected partnerships." Something shifted in his expression, a vulnerability she'd never seen before. "Is that what this is? A partnership?" "Professionally speaking," she clarified quickly, though the intensity of his gaze made her heart beat faster. "Of course," he agreed, though something in his tone suggested disappointment. As dinner progressed, Nora found herself sharing stories she rarely told, about her parents' early death, raising Fiona while pursuing her education, the struggles and triumphs that had shaped her career. Harrison listened with genuine interest, asking questions that revealed surprising insight. "Your parents would be proud," he said when she described her first major project, a community garden system in an underserved neighborhood. "What about your parents?" she ventured, realizing how little she knew about his past. A shadow crossed his face. "My father was demanding. Excellence was expected, weakness despised." He twisted his glass slowly. "My mother left when I was 10. I raised my brother while my father built his business empire." "That's a heavy burden for a child," Nora said softly. Harrison shrugged. "It taught me self-reliance, and to recognize what matters, which is," his amber eyes met hers directly, "integrity, vision, the courage to stand by both even when others don't understand." In that moment, Nora realized how profoundly she had misjudged him. Beneath the calculating exterior lay principles as deeply held as her own, expressed differently, perhaps, but no less genuine. Their conversation continued late into the night, bridging professional respect and personal connection with each passing hour. When Harrison walked her to her hotel room, an unexpected tension hung between them. Questions unasked, possibilities unexplored. "Thank you," she said at her door, "for believing in my work when others didn't." "I believe in exceptional things," he replied, his voice low, "and exceptional people." For a heartbeat, she thought he might lean closer, might cross the invisible boundary between colleague and something more. Instead, he stepped back ever controlled. "Good night, Nora." She watched him walk away, struck by the strange realization that somewhere between arguments and late-night collaborations, Harrison Reed had become more than her benefactor or business partner. He had become essential, a thought as terrifying as it was exhilarating. "Shadows of Truth," the headline blazed across Nora's tablet screen. Reed Technologies under investigation, water filtration systems linked to toxic runoff. She stared in disbelief at the accusations that their Taiwan project had compromised groundwater, that proprietary chemicals in the filtration system were causing environmental damage, that Harrison had knowingly prioritized profits over safety. "It's not possible," she murmured, scrolling through the article. The technical specifications described bore little resemblance to her actual designs. Someone had tampered with the implementation, or the reporting was deliberately misleading. Nora tried calling Harrison repeatedly, but her calls went straight to voicemail. Reed Technologies' headquarters was swarming with reporters when she arrived, and security initially refused to let her enter. "Ms. Wesley!" Vivian hurried across the lobby, looking uncharacteristically disheveled. "Thank goodness, Mr. Reed has been trying to reach you." "My calls aren't going through," Nora explained, following Vivian to a private elevator. "The board disabled his company phone access this morning," Vivian said grimly. "They're voting on whether to remove him as CEO." The elevator opened directly into Harrison's office, where he stood surrounded by lawyers and executives in heated discussion. When he spotted Nora, relief visibly washed over his face. "Excuse me," he said to the group, crossing to meet her. "Nora, I need your help." Up close, she could see the toll the crisis had taken, his eyes shadowed by exhaustion, his customary composure frayed at the edges. "What happened?" she demanded. "Those specifications in the news, they're not ours." "No, they're not," he confirmed. "Someone substituted counterfeit materials during implementation. Our investigation suggests internal sabotage, likely orchestrated by my former COO, James Whitaker." "The man you fired 3 months ago?" Harrison nodded grimly. "For ethical violations, I couldn't prove conclusively. He appears to have maintained relationships with certain contractors and orchestrated this as revenge." The lawyers approached, expressions tense. "Mr. Reed, the board is waiting. Without concrete evidence clearing the company, they'll likely vote to step you down and settle the claims." "I need time," Harrison insisted. "Nora's original specifications and testing data proved the system couldn't cause this contamination." Nora's mind raced. "The molecular structure of our compounds is fundamentally different from what's being reported. If we can get samples from the site, already in process," Harrison confirmed. "But it will take days we don't have. The board votes in 3 hours. Then we need leverage," Nora decided. "Something to buy time." What followed was a frantic scramble through research archives, testing protocols, and implementation records. Harrison worked alongside her with single-minded focus, his usual commanding presence channeled into partnership rather than control. 2 hours later, they found it. Discrepancies in shipping manifests that could only be explained by deliberate substitution. Materials that should have come from their approved supplier in Germany had instead been routed through a shell. "Company connected to Whitaker. This isn't definitive proof," one of the lawyers cautioned. "It's enough to raise reasonable doubt," Harrison countered. "Enough to delay the vote." As the legal team departed to present their findings to the board, Harrison sagged into a chair, looking suddenly vulnerable. "Thank you, Nora. Few would have stood by me today." She sat beside him, struck by the genuine gratitude in his voice. "I know our work. I know it couldn't cause this damage. And me?" he asked quietly. "Do you know me well enough to be certain I wouldn't cut corners for profit?" Nora considered him thoughtfully. The Harrison Reed she'd first met, cold, calculating, seemingly ruthless, might have been capable of such compromise. But the man she'd come to know over months of collaboration was different. "I believe in your integrity," she said finally, "even when others don't understand it." He smiled faintly, recognizing his own words from Taiwan. "The board won't be as easily convinced." "Then we'll fight," she said simply. "Together." Harrison reached for her hand, his touch unexpectedly gentle. "Why, Nora? Why risk your reputation defending mine?" The question caught her off guard. Why indeed? Professional loyalty only explained so much. The truth, that he had become important to her in ways that transcended business, felt too vulnerable to voice. "Because I've seen who you really are," she said instead. "Behind the corporate facade and public persona, I've seen the man who guaranteed my sister's medical care, who works until dawn to perfect a design, who speaks Mandarin and remembers how I take my coffee and believes in making impossible things possible." Something shifted in his amber eyes. Hope, perhaps, or wonder. Before he could respond, Vivian burst in with news. The board had agreed to postpone their vote pending a full investigation. The following weeks were a whirlwind of forensic accounting, environmental testing, and legal maneuvering. The truth emerged piece by piece. Whitaker had indeed orchestrated the sabotage, substituting toxic compounds and falsifying test results to frame Reed Technologies. When the final evidence was presented, vindicating Harrison completely, Nora expected triumph. Instead, he seemed subdued as they left the board meeting together. "This should be a victory," she observed as they rode the elevator down. "Why do you look like you've lost?" Harrison studied her thoughtfully. "This crisis revealed vulnerabilities in my company, in my leadership. Changes are necessary." "What kind of changes?" The elevator doors opened to the lobby where waiting journalists immediately surged forward. Harrison placed a protective hand on the small of her back, guiding her through the crowd to a waiting car. Once inside, he finally answered her question. "I'm restructuring the company, creating a separate division focused entirely on environmental innovation, with complete autonomy from shareholder pressure." Nora raised her eyebrows. "That's ambitious." "It needs a director," he continued, his gaze intent. "Someone with uncompromising principles and extraordinary vision." Understanding dawned slowly. "You want me to lead it?" "I want you to own it," he corrected. 51% controlling interest, legally protected from board interference. "Your vision, your methods, your team?" Nora stared at him in disbelief. "Why would you give away control of potentially your most valuable division?" For the first time in their acquaintance, Harrison seemed genuinely uncertain, vulnerability clear in his expression. "Because some things matter more than control. Because I've watched you fight for your principles even when it cost you everything. Because—" He hesitated, then finished simply. "Because I trust you, Nora Wesley, more than I've trusted anyone in my life." The magnitude of the gesture, of the faith it represented, left Nora speechless. This was no business decision, but a profound act of respect and perhaps something deeper neither had dared name. "I'll need complete creative freedom," she said finally, "and priority hiring of local experts in every implementation region." A smile slowly spread across his face, warm, genuine, and touched with something that might have been admiration. "I expected nothing less." As their car moved through the city streets, Nora felt the trajectory of her life shifting once again, not by circumstance or necessity this time, but by choice. A choice to build something extraordinary alongside this complex, surprising man who had seen her potential long before she fully recognized it herself. Full circle, 5 years passed in a blur of innovation, expansion, and transformation. Wesley Environmental, once a division of Reed Technologies, had become its own global entity, revolutionizing water conservation across 3 continents and turning Nora into a reluctant public figure in the process. Tonight, she stood backstage at the Global Innovation Summit, straightening her emerald gown and trying to calm the butterflies in her stomach. Receiving the Lifetime Achievement Award at 39 felt premature, almost fraudulent, yet the impact of her work was undeniable. "Nervous?" a familiar voice asked. Nora turned to find Harrison watching her with a smile. Older now, silver threading liberally through his dark hair, laugh lines at the corners of his eyes that hadn't existed when they first met. The years had softened him in subtle ways while sharpening his focus on what truly mattered. "Terrified," she admitted. "I hate public speaking," says the woman who faced down the United Nations Climate Committee last month. She laughed, despite herself. That was different. That was about the work, not me. Harrison stepped closer, adjusting the delicate pendant at her throat, his gift on the day Wesley Environmental had become independent. A single perfect teardrop diamond suspended in platinum. "The work is you, Nora," he said softly. "Your vision, your perseverance, your refusal to compromise. That's why you're being honored tonight." His proximity still affected her after all these years, still quickened her pulse and warmed her skin. Their relationship had evolved into a complex dance of professional collaboration and deep personal connection, yet neither had crossed the final boundary between friendship and something more intimate. "I wouldn't be here without you," she reminded him. Something flickered in his amber eyes. The same intensity she'd glimpsed that first day in his office, now tempered with affection and shared history. "You would have found your path eventually. I merely accelerated the journey." "Ever humble," she teased. The stage manager appeared, signaling 5 minutes until her introduction. Harrison squeezed her hand reassuringly before stepping back. "I'll be in the front row." True to his word, when Nora took the stage minutes later, Harrison sat directly before her, his steady presence an anchor in the sea of faces. She began her speech, recounting the journey from small-scale urban projects to global implementation. As she spoke, memories cascaded through her mind, the struggling architect selling her company, the desperate sister in a hospital garden, the determined partner working through the night in Taiwan, the loyal ally during the corporate crisis. Each moment a thread in the tapestry that had brought her here, with Harrison Reed woven through it all. Innovation isn't just about technology, she told the audience. It's about courage. The courage to envision something better and the perseverance to bring that vision to life, even when others call it impossible. Her gaze found Harrison's, and the world seemed to narrow to just the two of them. Sometimes we need someone who sees our potential before we fully recognize it ourselves. Someone who challenges us to be better, reach further, dream bigger. Emotion tightened her throat as she continued. Years ago, someone told me I would thank them one day for seeing what I couldn't yet see. At the time, I thought it was arrogance. A tear slipped down her cheek before she could stop it. I didn't understand it was faith. Faith in what we could build together. In the front row, Harrison sat motionless, his amber eyes never leaving hers, something profound and unspoken passing between them. After the ceremony, they escaped the crush of well-wishers to a quiet garden terrace overlooking the city. The night air carried the scent of jasmine, stars scattered like diamonds above them. "Your speech was beautiful," Harrison said, handing her a glass of champagne. "Though I suspect you veered from your prepared remarks," Nora smiled, taking the glass. "Some things need to be said without rehearsal." They stood in companionable silence, shoulders nearly touching as they gazed at the skyline. Below them, the city gleamed with thousands of lights, many buildings now incorporating their water systems, visible as cascading vertical gardens and rooftop reservoirs. "Do you remember what you said to me that first day?" Nora asked suddenly. "In your office? When I told you that you didn't understand my vision?" Harrison turned to face her fully, his expression softening with remembrance. "I said that someday you would thank me for seeing what you couldn't. You were right." She set down her glass and moved closer, heart pounding. "Not about the business or the technology or even my potential." "What then?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "About us." Nora reached up to touch his face, fingers tracing the strong line of his jaw. "About what we could become together. About how I would feel, standing here years later realizing that the most valuable thing you gave me wasn't opportunity or resources." Harrison's hand covered hers, warm and steady. "What was it?" "Patience," she said simply. "The patience to let me find my way to you in my own time, to build trust gradually, to learn who you truly are beneath all those careful layers. The patience to let love grow naturally without demands or expectations." Tears gathered in her eyes, unashamed this time. "You were right, Harrison. I do love you. Not for what you've done, but for who you are. For your integrity and your vision and your quiet generosity." For a moment he seemed unable to speak, emotion rendering the normally eloquent man wordless. Then he drew her close, one hand cradling her face with exquisite tenderness. "I've loved you since you stood in my office and told me I didn't understand harmony," he confessed. "Loved your brilliance and your compassion and your stubborn determination to make the world better. But I knew that love couldn't be rushed or demanded or purchased, only earned, day by day, through actions rather than words." "You've earned it," Nora whispered, rising on tiptoe as his head lowered toward hers, 1,000 times over. Their first kiss held the sweetness of culmination, not an ending but a beginning, the final bridge between separate paths and a shared journey. When they parted, Nora saw in Harrison's amber eyes the same wonder she felt. The recognition that some loves are worth the wait, worth the work, worth every step of the path that leads to them. "I told you so," he murmured against her hair, and she could hear the smile in his voice. No longer the cold certainty of the billionaire who had purchased her company, but the gentle teasing of the man who had won her heart. Nora laughed through her tears, holding him close as the night wrapped around them. "Just this once," she conceded. "I'm glad you were right." Above them, stars wheeled in ancient patterns, witnessing the completion of a circle begun years before, when a powerful man who once believed love was a weakness learned that real love can't be bought, only earned, and a woman who once thought him cold discovered the patient heart beating beneath the careful exterior. Some promises take years to fulfill, but time reveals their truth in the end.